All right, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to raise the awareness of trauma and to support and inspire new trauma therapists just starting out on the trauma-informed journey. I do that with my membership community, Trauma Therapist 2.0, my online courses and workshops, and the Trauma Therapist newsletter. If you're a therapist of any kind and you work with individuals who've been impacted by trauma, I invite you to head on over to my website at thetraumatherapistproject.com. That's thetraumatherapistproject.com. All right, let's get started. You ready to do it?
I'm ready.
Okay. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. Guy McPherson here, and I am very excited to have as my guest today, Jessica Begg. Jessica, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Guy.
All right. So Jessica is a registered dietitian and clinical counselor at Shift Nutrition and Counselling. She helps people heal from overly emotional eating and binge eating. Jessica has worked over 10 years in multiple eating disorder treatment programs. She now works with her clients individually, but also within her online group program called Connected Eating. Jessica, welcome.
Thanks.
All right. So before we get going here, share with our listeners where you're from originally and where you are currently.
I'm born and raised in Vancouver, and I live in Vancouver. I've kind of moved around various parts of Canada, but the West Coast is my home. So I always gravitate back there. Yeah.
Nice. All right. So this topic is really interesting to me for a number of reasons. And I'll share those as we kind of move into this. But Jessica, share with our listeners how the heck you got into this field.
I fell into it entirely. Food was not an interest of mine, other than the fact that I loved food generally, but it wasn't like the science of it wasn't really my passion. But I went to school. I did my first degree in biology. A friend of mine in a chemistry class said that she wanted to be a dietitian. I had no idea even what that was. And I thought it was a nice way to use my biology degree, but talk to people. I really wanted to work with people. And so I went back to school I finished that degree and went to school to do my nutrition degree, which is kind of the segue to being a dietitian, do an undergrad or a master's in nutrition. And I, again, was just kind of floating around in my way. And I was just finished my practicum, and somebody didn't want to do the eating disorders portion of their job. They were the outpatient dietitian. It was 4 hours of the week. And one of the other gals at the lunch table said, "Hey, Jessica needs some work." And so I got flung into that. And I'm ever so grateful that I did, actually, because it's the perfect niche for me, that I love understanding why people eat a certain way, how they've developed their relationship with food, but not necessarily about food, you know? Yeah.
So it's the relationship. So let's get into it. So, okay. So you were flung into it. Was this at your training, still in your training?
Yeah.
Okay.
So So after you do your degree, you have to do a year-long training. You have to do it's an internship where you stay. Dietitians are kind of like this misunderstood kind of beings within the healthcare system. So I'll take this moment to explain us.
Please, yeah.
Yeah. So we typically work in clinical settings. So in hospitals, outpatients, we also work in long-term care, or we do food service. And so dietitians will do a lot of teaching in the hospital. So if somebody had a heart attack, for instance, we would teach them how to eat properly to manage their cholesterol, or going into surgery where they might have to eat differently for that. In big industry kitchens, there will be a dietitian managing all of that. Okay. So we're very different than, say, what somebody might call a nutritionist. And we get very confused with that word, where people think that we do a lot of just like diet, like fad diet culture training, which is not the case.
So what is a nutritionist then?
A nutritionist is generally an unregulated term. So in different parts of Canada, for instance, in the States is similar. There's different states in the US and provinces in Canada where you have to be a dietitian in order to call yourself a nutritionist. Same way, like, for instance, you can't just call yourself a doctor without having the proper There's a regulatory body that manages that word. So same thing with registered dietitians. We have to have the amount of training in order to call ourselves that, where a nutritionist in some areas of North America, you can just call yourself a nutritionist. You do a 8-month program, or if that, or something, you could just call yourself a nutritionist and offer people food advice.
Okay. So how do things unfold for you such that you get more and more into this sector, this field?
Yeah. So I, like I said, I got trained as a dietitian. It kind of started working in a little bit of all sorts of different areas, just because I was trying to cobble together work as a kid. And because eating disorders is such a very specialized field, I started getting pulled into other programs that they said, oh, Jessica's working here in this small program. We need somebody here to cover over a mat leave. So then I'd start a mat leave, but then maybe somebody might come back. And so next thing you know, I'm there for 10 years in different programs. So I ended up actually working in many different eating disorders programs in and around the Vancouver area. And my practice just kind of grew in that regard. And then in terms of my further going, I went back to school about 5 years ago, went back to school to get my master's in counseling psychology, because I figured that was a big miss in terms of my work, that like I said, I really loved understanding the how and the why, and I wanted to know more about the how and the why. And so went back to school to get my master's in counseling. And I found that really created a lot of depth to my work, to be able to really talk to people about what's going on for them, rather than, sticking into the food realm.
Right.
So after that, then I opened up my private practice full time to help people.
Cool. So with broad brushstrokes, what is or what are eating disorders?
Ooh, that's a big question. What are eating disorders? Typically, there is a diagnosable behaviors and kind of traits that alongside with eating disorders. What are they? That's I don't know if I could conceptualize it in one thing. I think how I would explain it to somebody that had never heard about it, I would say that somebody's history in terms of their sense of self has been disrupted in a way that their relationship with their body and food is affected long-term. And anxiety, depression plays a really strong role in that. And it's a really difficult thing to recover from, and it takes a long time.
So I know a little bit about eating disorders. It's certainly not my specialization, but I guess I'm a little surprised to hear you say that someone's sense of self is real. It's right in there. It's really connected to that. And is trauma oftentimes found within the picture there?
Yeah, I would say certainly in terms of childhood experiences, the ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences, are a strong feature of somebody that has an eating disorder. So they will typically, clients of mine, I think what often people will say that they had very good upbringings, but maybe their parents weren't able to give them the emotional support that they needed. So, being able to regulate their own emotions, or again, understand who they are, like I said, kind of gets disrupted, and food becomes the filler to help support them in that way. There can be distinct traumatic events that have happened in their lives that could contribute to an eating disorder for sure. But that's actually kind of the minority in terms of people that struggle with food. Typically, it's ongoing small courses of events throughout their life that has contributed to this.
Courses of events in terms of what? traumatic events or disturbing events or distressing events?
Yeah, like I think, I guess I would say it would be an ongoing things. Yeah, like ongoing distressing events. And I think that somebody's genetic predisposition to having anxiety makes distressing events really unbearable and can be overwhelming. And food plays such an integral role in helping us soothe and to also create some sense of normality in our lives, that if I control these certain patterns of the way that I eat, then I know that everything is okay. But in actuality, it's really about how I'm feeling in this space right now. And that can be difficult.
Now, at what point, I mean, I'm assuming it's not unlike a lot of other diagnosable disorders where when things start to kind of disrupt your life or interfere with the normal ongoings of your life, then it becomes an issue. At what point does someone would you say someone has a eating, what's the proper term you want to use here? An eating disorder?
Yeah, or disordered eating, like just
Okay.
even that they're not diagnosable. Yeah. I think it's a spectrum. I think that some people can have a lot of disordered eating and it's okay for them. That, technically even doing regular diets is disordered eating, and people will kind of ebb and flow into doing various diets. And I think we all know that person that's like, oh, I loved I love doing keto, or
Right.
I love trying different things. And it's really not a problem for them, that they kind of think it's a-okay. And, but there's a lot of other people where they might delve into this world and it sucks them into a lot of guilt and shame. And they're thinking about food all the time, and it's really just overtaking their lives. I think that a lot of people exist in that space and it's not comfortable. And I think that they should get help at that time. Speaking of that, people don't get help enough. That they often, a common feature of disordered eating or eating disorders, that they don't think that they're sick enough in order to seek help, because a lot of dieting behaviors are so normalized that, oh, like guy can do this and he feels fine. Why am I feeling so overwhelmed by it?
Well, that's a really interesting point. For those people who are listening and they're like, oh man, when does someone have an issue? What would you say to the people who are listening to this? How would they know?
I think if they're spending a lot of time thinking and worrying about food, I think that that's the time to ask somebody, like, hey, is this a problem?
In terms of what? I love food, but in terms of what? Like, oh, should I eat this? Should I not? Oh my God, if I'm going to get fat, or I'm going to, and you haven't even mentioned binging and purging.
Yeah, for sure. Certainly if you have behaviors like binging and purging, where you're feeling out of control with your eating and feeling the need that you need to, quote unquote, fix it with purging, whether it be through exercise or vomiting or laxatives, those kinds of things, for sure. I think people that are in that space know and feel that there's something not going right, and they might need to find the time or like the readiness to come and talk to somebody, because there's a lot of guilt in and around not feeling, because we moralize eating. We think that if you're a good person, if you eat a certain way, so in converse, if you're not eating that way, you feel bad. And so to go and seek help feels like you got to kind of bring, like all these things like, oh, I feel bad about this. But I think that there's a whole massive population of people that wouldn't necessarily be doing that, or they might. That word emotional eating is kind of an interesting one, because food should have emotions linked with it, but often people will say that I'm overly emotionally eating, like I feel like I'm using food to manage my emotions. And I don't think you need to be in that space. I think that if you're not feeling great about the way that you're eating, there's lots of people like myself that really want to help people move past that. And you don't have to wait to get super sick to see us.
Can you give us, and I realize everyone's different, but Can you give us kind of like a case study of like someone who's come to you and maybe how they presented and what you did? Give us an idea of what it looks like in an
Sure.
instance.
Sure. There's kind of a common story that I will hear. Somebody might say to me that somebody in their family really struggled with their weight, or that another person in their family was really on and off diets all the time. So there's usually an environment in and around when somebody grew up that's very weight focused, very food focused in terms of that. And somebody might say that at some point they decided to get healthy. And so they just kind of start delving into this idea of restricting or cutting back on stuff. Then it's kind of quickly spirals to maybe binging or feeling out of control, because this restriction can only last for so long. And this restriction also has a lot of a very halo healthy, I'm a good person effect. So they get a lot of positive reinforcement by, if I eat in this certain pattern, I'm a good person. So maybe I always say this story to clients that, then something happened. It was, a birthday or some sort of event where they're eating something that they were otherwise had cut out, and they were a good person when they weren't eating cake. Now it's their birthday and everybody's saying, come on, have cake. This is, you deserve it.
Right.
It's a treat. But then they feel horrible about it because they were a good person. They didn't eat cake or have chips or all of these things. So guilt and shame comes around. And then so they up the ante. So they will restrict further. Maybe they'll not eat breakfast, or maybe they won't eat any junk food or any of these things. And then it comes around again, and they remember how much guilt and shame they had after the first time when they just normally ate the piece of cake at their birthday party. So this is what builds the uncontrolled binging sensation, is that it's the what the heck response. I forget it. I'm just going to I'm going to eat all the cake because I got to get it all out, because I know that I'm going to have to get back on track on Monday. Or so it intensifies this kind of like oscillation of back and forth. And so by the time somebody comes to see me, they say, help me with this binging part. I feel super out of control. I don't feel comfortable in my body. I don't feel healthy. And what do I do? Typically, there's kind of a first step in which I help people. And one is, because I've, worked as a dietitian for so long, I always kind of, go back into the food, but we talk about trying to break the restriction part of this restriction binge cycle, is that they're focusing on the binging that is the problem, but it's actually the restriction that we need to feed your body, feel comfortable with eating with food again. And this is the real trauma effect of this, that the restricting really makes us feel, it's a way that we torture people, is to starve them. Right. So there's this real, like when we pull people out of it to respond of like, oh, thank God, and like eat all the food is such a normal response. So to create safety in and around food again, to feel like you can eat and trust food and not have to restrict it in order to be healthy again. So that's the first path.
Okay. Now, where does this identity with self come in?
Yeah. So I think really what it speaks to is that in that beginning part of the story is that person may not necessarily feel like that they're good enough, that they should make changes, that they need to. And I think that this is the messages that people get within the family context, that in order to be a good person, you must restrict, or you must eat in a certain way, you must look a certain way. And I think that that's the identity piece of how can we help people to understand that they're okay no matter what, that they don't have to eat in a certain way to be acceptable. They don't have to look a certain way to be acceptable, that the diversity of bodies is just like the beauty of diversity that we see in all sorts of things in and around the world.
Now, do you work in group settings?
I do.
Okay.
So in my practice, I built this group, and really my intention was to because it's so isolating, struggling with food. Often people don't talk to other people about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I built out this group. It's the Connected Eating program, where we kind of work through this process that I typically have brought people through, and but then also have the depth of conversations of having other people that are working through with it. It's a work in progress. Like I think I'm trying different stuff all the time, trying to figure out what's a good fit for different people.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I encourage my clients to be as curious and flexible to try to see what's going to work for them. And that might work for them, it may not. And yeah, we try different things.
Let me just remind everyone that I'm speaking with Jessica Begg. Her website is shiftnutrition.com. And you also have a podcast, which is awesome. What's the name of that?
It's called The Art and Science of Eating.
Okay. Art and Science of Eating. We'll have that linked up at the show notes page here at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. Is eating disorders, or are eating disorders, do we find more women within that realm or not?
Yeah. The numbers still state that women are more often to have eating disorders or disordered eating. And I think it's more so in terms of women are told that they have to look a certain way in order to be acceptable. Like I think even we've moved away from that, but I think still that message is still being told on day in, day out, generation over generation. Men do suffer with eating disorders, and more than what people think, that it wasn't recognized for a long time.
I see. I mean, this is such a huge issue. As you were going through the explanation of, dieting and feeling shame, I was thinking to myself, I mean, I felt like that. I mean, I think a lot of people, especially now in our culture, and I don't think I'm reaching, we're onslaughted with, diets and what we should be eating and how we should, even men, how we should be looking. And I recently did like a green juice fast for a few days. It's hard. I was going nuts. Going nuts.
Yes.
Let me ask you, did you have an issue with this yourself?
I didn't.
Okay.
And there's pros and cons to, I think, in terms of that. I think that there's a bunch of privileges. I think I will say in terms of for myself, one was I didn't struggle with food in that, my mom was an immigrant to Canada. My dad, we were just like lower middle class family, and food, there wasn't much talking around bodies or body shapes or any of that kind of stuff. And food was, we just ate it, and my mom made food at home. So I think that in some ways, people that work, other healthcare professionals that have had eating disorders, I think that they give a different perspective and can give a lot of more depth and or different depth, I should say. I in terms of, from my perspective, I feel like I can confidently say that somebody that hasn't struggled, like I would do this. This is how I would approach this. And let me kind of like show you why I would think it this way, that doesn't have an eating disorder lens. I don't know. I think everybody that's looking for help, maybe that may or may not be a good fit for them. They may want somebody that struggles with it. Also have thin privilege. I think that that's also a really important piece here.
Thin privilege. I don't think I've ever heard of that.
Yeah. Just like,
excuse me 1 second. My eye is tearing. Okay, go ahead.
Just like white privilege, which I also have white privilege, is that I can move through this world without my skin color being an issue for getting medical care. Same thing with my thin privilege, is that I can go in and say that I broke my leg and not have somebody tell me that I need to lose weight. That is a huge thing in terms of people getting care and feeling safe in their body, is if they can't get medical care.
Mm-hmm.
Or that they get told that all of the things that they're dealing with are all in and around their weight. A lot of the research that we've done has weight bias in it. So we've linked health and weight very tightly where it really shouldn't be. So, yeah.
Wow, interesting. And when I asked you if you had issues with that, I wasn't implying that if you did, you would therefore be more effective or could be more effective. That wasn't my implication. So I hope that wasn't.
No, not at
Okay.
all. Like, I think
Okay.
it does come up. It's a question that comes up regularly. So I I like addressing it because I think for somebody sitting across from me, they kind of want to know, like, because a lot of it is, this is my opinion on what I think that you should do.
Right, right.
So they might want to know, like, where is that coming from? Is it coming from that you've struggled with it yourself, or have you not? And I think it's an important part of the conversation.
So, getting back to this whole topic of self-identity, it's very important to me. And I think it's of course one thing to name that is in there, and it's another thing to work with that and to quote unquote treat that. How do you do that? How is that done in this with the work you do?
It's a slow process of trying to help somebody see their worthiness is not in these external things, that they are worthy of love, they're worthy of care, and that they're worthy of their own love and their own self-care to take care of themselves. That takes a long time because there's all sorts of conflicting messages out there, right? Like I said, going to getting help and not getting the response that you feel like you deserve. That one's hard. It's hard.
Mm-hmm. Now, at what point, you talked about this being in terms of a continuum. I love that concept. At what point does the idea of kind of inpatient care, when is that brought up?
Yeah, when they're medically unwell. And so common things might be, heart function, electrolytes, extreme weight loss, rapid weight loss. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's not my favorite. I don't think it's anybody's favorite to be hospitalized. So we try to keep everybody out of the hospital.
What, Jessica, what do you feel it is about you that allows you to do this work?
Oh.
And let me just, not even just allows you, but I mean, obviously you're passionate about it. That allows you to do it with such passion. Let me say that.
I think that I've learned that everybody's trying to do the best that they can. And I think that once you can see how hard everybody is working, I don't know, like I actually don't know how to answer your question. I don't know. I love my work. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. I love the people that I work with. And I think that often my clients, particularly that struggle with emotional eating and binge eating in particular, they don't get proper help and really support that fits for them. I think that they've been harmed in a lot of ways, even from other dietitians, other healthcare professionals. I feel like it's a real privilege when they finally come to see me that I want to take really good care of my people because yeah. And it's just so, I love when somebody says to me, I've never heard of it that way. And that I think well, I wish you had come sooner. That's why I always say to people, like, please come and find somebody like myself, because we love talking to you. And this could be so much easier.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, you certainly answered that question. So do you work in person, online, both? What?
Before both, since COVID, I've been all online. In that way, it's been kind of nice actually for me personally. My husband works in a different city entirely. Like we have to fly, it's about 1,000 kilometers away from me. So that's been one silver lining with COVID, is that I've been able to go back and forth between Vancouver and Calgary. So I'm going to try and stay online. And it seems to be working with my clients.
Now, this kind of as we wind down here, in terms of COVID, what have you been seeing in terms of that impact on this?
Yeah, I imagine with your work as well, you might see how the isolation has really taken a toll on people. I think it's eating disorders, they say, have increased dramatically. I've seen a lot of relapse. I've seen a lot of clients coming back to me because they've been struggling more so now. It's been hard on a lot of people, and food comes along with that. When we're struggling, just generally we'll struggle with food. So yeah, it's been a really tough time for everybody.
Okay, let me ask you that. So I'm enjoying talking to you, and there's so much I want to talk to you about, but I want you to share kind of an early clinical error and what you learned from that.
Oh gosh, I'm actually I knew you were going to ask this question. I had to. It's hard to be vulnerable about these errors, and this one's a big one. And so when I learned through school, and I talk about, like I mentioned, weight bias in terms of, the research, and that's how I learned things in school was that people that are in larger bodies, they are unwell, and we need to help people fix that. And we learned in school that of risk factors of a chronic disease, so like heart issues, let's say, again, there'll be 10 risk factors, and one of them will be diet and exercise, and the other 90% will be things like genetics, age, medication that they're on, et cetera, socioeconomic status. But that one little nugget, that's what us as dietitians, we can work on. So by exploiting that one little nugget, we made it sound like it was a really big deal, that is actually the other way around, that 90% of what we should be working on is diet and exercise, and that little nugget is actually genetics. So anyways, the fast forward to working with people that struggle with anxiety around weight and who they are. An older dietitian, or the dietitian actually that had kind of passed this clinic to me, she told me that, when people are worried about eating more and they're worried about weight gain, just tell them that, as a health professional, it's not in our best interest to have uncontrolled weight gain. So, quote unquote, I'm not going to make you fat, was what I learned. And when I was working with people that was worried about that, it kind of sometimes helped people not feel nervous about it. So it's like, oh, maybe this is a thing that I should keep reassuring people that this isn't going to transpire. Like, we're not going to do that. What I learned, though, is that I was perpetuating fat phobia, that I was part of the problem, that by allowing people to fear changes in their bodies, to fear other people's bodies that were in larger bodies, to fear the word fat, was actually perpetuating harm. And so what I now understand is that whole matrix, talking about it in that way, like talking about diversity of bodies, as in there's a type of body that one should fear, and that I'm going to somehow, like keep you here, and that was the problem. That we need to move beyond that. That fat bodies are not unhealthy. And in fact, people in larger bodies live longer, and that our bodies shouldn't remain the same, and that there should be changes and fluctuations depending on time of our lives, or stages of our lives, or things that change, or during COVID that we may gain weight, and that it's not something that we need to fear.
So I guess the implicit distinction here is between a fat body and an and a healthy or unhealthy body.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. I appreciate you sharing that. That's really kind of enlightening for me. I think for a lot of people too, that you made that distinction. And I appreciate you sharing that and being vulnerable to share that.
It was a tough one because I think there's a lot of people that are in the eating disorders realm that they're calling this out now, that they're like, yeah, my eating disorders treatment provider told me that she wasn't going to let me get fat. And I was like, I was dying inside when I heard that, because I had changed, but I had said something, some semblance of that in my early years. And I would say for quite some time, like there's a strong prevalence of fat phobia within the eating disorders treatment clinics.
Mm-hmm.
And I was part of the machinery. And
Wow.
you're kind of like, I'm doing my thing. Like I'm trying to help people, but not really realizing where we were still keeping this weight bias and fat phobia in our treatment.
Awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. All right. So people are interested in reaching out to you. What's the best way to do that, Jessica?
They can email me.
Okay.
Jessica@shiftnutrition.com.
Okay. Well, I'll have that link up here at the show notes page. And how about a go-to book recommendation? Whether
this is okay. Yeah. So
topic related or not.
This is my fave right now. You can see I'm like,
okay. The Body is Not an Apology.
By Sonia Renee Taylor.
Okay.
This is a wonderful book
I haven't heard of that.
Yeah. It's a great one. She on radical body acceptance, accepting our bodies and accepting all the bodies around us to create peace.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, look, it was a pleasure meeting you, and I really enjoyed speaking with you. And I realize there's a lot more to talk about. I'd love to have you back at some point. We can look at a different facet of this. Awesome. Jessica, thank you so much. You're awesome, and I love the work you're doing.
Thanks, Guy. Thank you so much for chatting with me.
All right. Take care.
Okay. Talk soon.
Thank you so much for listening and supporting this podcast. And if you'd like to join the hundreds of other therapists who are each month keeping up to date and informed and inspired about what's going on in the world of trauma, I'd love to invite you to head on over to the Trauma Therapist newsletter. That's the traumatherapistnewsletter.com.